Hello! In this module and in the several subsequent modules, we're going to be moving into a new topic. We're going to be discussing ethics. In this module, we'll be discussing egoism in particular, and in the next module as well, and then we'll be discussing some other topics of ethics. So in this first video, I'm going to sort of introduce the subject matter of ethics. What sort of questions are we thinking about? But even before I do that, I want to wrap up from the previous units. So we've been talking about theism, belief in God, and we talked about the idea that maybe God is this perfect, supreme, infinite being. We considered Paley's design argument for the existence of God, which says that because the universe is well-ordered, there must be a supreme intelligence that created that well-ordered aspect of the universe. And we saw that Darwin, and that the main source, the main kind of well-ordering that Paley talked about was life, and in particular human intelligent life, but all life. And we saw that Darwin and subsequent biology in the theory of evolution explains how complexity, and in particular good complexity, can arise without a designer. Not that that's necessarily evolution's goal, but it can produce that. And then we turned to the issue of evil. We saw, first of all, that maybe, according to Hume, the world is not so well ordered as to provide evidence of a supremely good designer. There's some order there, but maybe it's not well enough ordered to make us think, oh yeah, that must have been produced by a good designer. And going further, we suggested, in fact, that the world is not only given how well ordered it is, not only does it not need a good designer, but it's unlikely that it would have been created by a good designer. And that would give us reason to think, in fact, that God, at least on the traditional conception of God, does not exist, that there isn't a supremely good designer. So, maybe you were persuaded by that, or maybe you weren't sure, or maybe you were persuaded and never had your mind changed by the design argument. But if you weren't persuaded by any of these, we then turned to James, who gave us a way to believe even if we have only inconclusive evidence. James thinks that our values must guide us when we are faced with genuine belief options, as we are when faced with the option of should I believe in the existence of God, or should I not believe in the existence of God, or at least when some of us are faced with that option. And James argued that perhaps missing out on true belief may be worse than false believing, and therefore, in order to not miss out on the value of true belief, we should go for it and believe in God. At least that would make sense for some of us. So are we going to resolve issues between the design argument and the problem of evil and James's idea that, well, we can believe even in the face of even given inconclusive evidence? No, we're not. In fact, we're going to leave those issues there. If you were interested in pursuing them further, then you could take the philosophy of religion course. But we're going to, having discussed some of those issues, we're going to leave them there. I'm not going to try to sort of tell you which view is correct or which view I think is correct. You can ask me if you want, but I'm going to let that go. And we're now going to turn to ethics. So, what are some basic ethical observations? Well, here are some observations that have to do with ethics. Friendship is valuable. Might doesn't make right. Justice is very important. So things like fairness and desert. What do you deserve? Do you deserve good things to happen to you? Bad things to happen to you? Equals should be treated equally. Free and informed requests prevent rights violations. If I freely ask you to do something and you freely agree, then your rights have not been violated. Agony is a bad thing. Genocide, torture, treachery, sadism, hostility, and slavery, those are wrong. Justice, fairness, kindness, being reasonable are all important. If you deliberately harm someone, you need justification. Self-interest isn't the only ethical consideration. Others' interests have moral significance as well. There's lots of moral fallibility. We fail morally sometimes. The law and tradition are morally fallible. Law and tradition are not always right about what we should do. In fact, everyone is morally fallible, at least in possibly making moral errors. Perhaps ought implies can. If you ought to do something, then it's possible for you to do it. And children are less responsible than adults. These are a whole bunch of observations we might make in a sort of a general area, the area of ethics. One important one that we're going to be relying on as we proceed is that is and ought are different. So I say, I will keep my promise, and I should keep my promise. So those are different claims. One is a prediction, one is an evaluation. Or I'm happy, that's not the same thing as saying it is good that I'm happy. Maybe I am happy, but it's not good that I'm happy. Maybe I'm happy about bad things. or maybe it would be good for me to be happy, but I'm not happy. So we can distinguish between claims about how things are, on the one hand, from claims about which things are good and bad, and how things ought to be on the other. And ethics fundamentally involves the latter kinds of claims. Claims about which things are good and bad, how things ought to be, what we ought to do. So it's related to, when we talk about ethics, we're talking about claims that involve good, bad, ought, and should, that involve claims about others' well-being, that involve claims about fairness, justice, respect for others, virtue, responsibility, rights and duties, liberties, social cooperation, praise, blame, and it's different from the law. So the law is closely related to ethics. Ideally, the laws say, if there's a law that says you can't do something, then you shouldn't do it, and if the law says you can do something, it's morally okay to do it, but they're not the same. For example, lying is often wrong, but it's often not illegal. Etiquette, so how to be polite. In general, you want to treat people well, but etiquette has a lot more details about how to be polite than are sort of morally required. You can be not very polished or polite and yet still be a perfectly kind and good person. It's presumably distinct from self-interest. That's what we'll be talking about in this issue, in this module. And it's distinct from tradition. Tradition is how people typically do things, and sometimes how people typically do things is not how they should do them. So here are 4 principles we might think of ethics. 1, don't impose unnecessary harm. 2, be nice and kind to others. 3, act justly and fairly. And 4, tell the truth. Those seem like important fundamental claims about how we should act. But there's still lots of questions we might have. Is it okay to kill animals? When? For survival? For the taste of their flesh? For research, scientific research? Is it okay to kill an innocent person if doing so saves others? How many people? Is it okay to have an abortion? Is it okay to perform an abortion? Is it okay to have premarital sex? Is it okay to lie? Is it okay to not help someone in need? If we are required to help some others in need, how much? How much do we have to sacrifice? In how much need do they have to be? What are the values that would make answers to those questions about what we should do the right answers? Who counts morally? Why do they count morally? What makes you and I count morally? We do. Why? What are the most important values and goods and bads that we need to respect or promote? So a theory of ethics would try to unify answers to all these questions. It would tell us what the basic values are. It would tell us how to respect and promote them. It would tell us how they fit into a good life. And so that's what we'll be looking at, different ethical theories. Ethical theories in an attempt to state sort of, here's what the most important basic values are, here's how we should respect and promote them, and here's what it would look like if we lived according to those values and we're trying to respect and promote them. And then we'll consider applying our theories of ethics to hard cases, things like abortion, aid to underdeveloped countries, animal rights, and racial injustice. Since we've been talking about religion, I briefly want to talk about the relationship between ethics and religion. So we're going to inquire in what's called the secular way. What that means is that we're going to be, in our inquiry, we're going to be agnostic about whether or not God exists. We're going to assume or presuppose that we can investigate a lot of ethical issues without deciding that. And then, we might, if we are believers, we would want to integrate our belief about God into our ethical conclusions, but we're just going to make them compatible, and we're going to see how far we can get without worrying about whether or not God exists. So we're really going to try to separate those two issues, and you'll see that we can get quite far in discussing ethical issues without bringing in God. And there are some good reasons for doing that, which we're not necessarily going to be getting into in this course because we don't have time, but I'm happy to discuss them with you if you would like to. So that's the end of this introduction to ethics. In the next video, we'll be turning to some sort of surprising views about self-interest that are important for ethics. So I'll see you there.